The Kings of War Gamers Edition book is a much lighter weight, much thinner version 3 of the game manual, which is designed for people who don't necessarily want to bring your whole hardback, really deep lore history book with you to, say, tournaments or just to your game center. So it's a lot more portable. It's got most of the fluff just taken out of it, but it's got everything else you need to actually play Kings of War in the book. So you've got your introduction to the game, and this also has a really nice introduction to playing the game, which focuses on using the Northern Alliance and the Night Stalkers armies. So the sort of the beginning part of this book, I mean, what with those kind of being the new armies anyway, focuses a lot on those image-wise and thematics-wise. You've got at the front very easy information about the basing, which is probably my most used page in the whole book, is coming back to the preferred model counts and the footprint of the movement trays that you need for your different units. So when you're working out what you need to take, you can see that your infantry, troop, regiment, horde or legion needs to be, for example, a horde of infantry needs to be on a 200 by 800 movement tray with 30 plus models on it. So that will be your preferred minimum model count. I think the actual number is closer to something like 30 or 40, something like 40 models will fit on that. And then basing examples too. So the changes in this book from version 2 are pretty much front and center. There's some changes to the front arcs and movement, reinforcing the sort of charge and adjustments of the movement phase. Again, focus on the new armies. You have your introduction to charging, because this is something that has had a lot of sort of change recently. People have been struggling with it in version 2. Everything else is pretty much just streamlined changes. So it goes into a lot of detail about movement there. Then terrain, height, line of sight. So Kings of War is something that uses height quite a lot. Different models have different heights, which allows you to shoot models behind them. So like giants are higher than trees, for example. Trees are height 1, 2, or 3, and models are height 1, 2, or 3, or 0 if the stuff is flat. So it's a really simple breakdown. There's no story in this, like with the other books. The Uncharted Empires book, for example, contains a lot of backstory for the other factions that are included in that. So the other things that people find interesting is this really handily has a good breakdown of all the special rules, which you would want. Information on how you build your force. This is something that requires a lot of focus on. Towards the start, where I looked at the units required for unit size, that's because in Kings of War, you can only take certain troops if you have the sort of bulk of your main force comprised of the classic units, if you like. So with the new army, the Northern Alliance, the clansmen are very representative of the core of the Northern Alliance. So you need to take a large regiment or a legion or a horde of those units in order to allow you to take the additional troops or the monsters or the titans or the war engines alongside them, because they are the core, the body of that army. So to properly represent them, you would have to have those people. So it's like an unlock system with your army selection. So this is a really helpful page too. I spent a lot of my time on this as well. More on building the army. Some changes in this to allies and alignments, which has confused a few people, and theme lists. So there's restrictions on theme lists now and some slight tweaks to who you can ally with. Then you've got your breakdown of all your magical artifacts, which is really handy if you don't want to buy the cards. Personally, I always grab the cards as well. I just find them easier to pop them next to whatever units. But I have in the past printed out these as well, and like a little piece of paper, and just pop them on. So they're like a token. Make my token versions of these. Then list of the schools of magic. Game scenarios in there. So this contains a good load of new scenarios, which is really cool. How to set these up. Same with the Vanguard book that kind of goes alongside this, the Ice and Iron update. There's some really cool new scenarios which are very focused around the northern area. So there's lots of use of like snow, ice, line of sight, and darkness. And then you go straight into the new army lists, the updated army lists. So there's some changes to what units are now sort of the uncommon units. So what will and won't count towards your base unit unlocking count. So there's some changes to those. And then a couple of little tweaks to some of the abilities attached to units, as well as bringing in some new units. which is in line with a lot of focus on, say, the elves and abyssal dwarfs. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of change, well, a lot of new stuff for abyssal dwarfs, and then the Northern Alliance. So the changes to the Northern Alliance here as well. So that's all cool. Or at least the new stuff. You see, I've marked the page on this one. So no points for guessing what army I'm building. Forces of Nature, Ogres, Neritica, and what you'll notice is this and Abyssal Dwarfs as well. Those really cool Abyssal Dwarfs. We do like the Abyssal Dwarfs. And then you've got your other armies: Empire of Dust, Forces of the Abyss, so the people who are causing all the problems anyway within the realms, and the Goblins. The Goblins are getting a lot of attention this year too, and Night Stalkers and Orcs. But I believe, and an undead army list too. The book stops there because the Uncharted Empires contains the fluff and the story and the army lists for things like the free dwarves and the human realms and the ratkin and the beasts. So one thing that Kings of War do and Mantic do really well is they support you using any model you want, really, as long as it can fit on the bases, as long as it can go into the movement trays, you can use anything. So they write lists and they write rules for models they don't even produce. So if you were an old, say, old world player, fantasy battles player, and you wanted to use one of your old armies, then there are rules for that, which Mantic will provide in their other supplements. So I have seen many people running Ratkins and Wood Elves and so on in these games as well. So it's fantastic. It's one of the reasons why Kings of War is regarded as probably the best mass battle fantasy game going. Doesn't have a lot of rivals, but people love Mantic for what they do. And I have to hand it to them, they want you to use any model you have. They just want you to play their game, whether you use their models or not. The only thing they care about are the people enforce these unit counts on the movement trays, because it just makes the game easy to understand, whether you're fighting a horde, a legion, a regiment, a troop, or whatnot. So that's the Gamers edition of the board book in a nutshell. It's a lot more slimmed down. There's no backstory, no storyline, but it contains all the rules, all the item references, all the unit references, all the magic and magic items, and the basic introduction to the game and scenarios as well. It deals with the changes to the rules, such as the charges and the shuffling and the getting in place. It's all you really need to play. So if you've been thinking of getting into Kings of War and you're wondering whether you need to buy an army or a starter set or anything, you need this book, especially if you used to be a fantasy battle player previously. If you want to play an army list that isn't in this book, then you need to have a look at the other book, which will give you the list of armies in there. But that is the Gamers Edition, the lightweight, cheaper version of the book that you can throw in your bag, take everywhere with you. This one has done hundreds and hundreds of miles in my bag, and it's a fantastic edition as well.